All right, guys, today's warm-up problem is about our guy Spencer. Spencer has invented a super speed, fuel-efficient go-kart that only needs two-thirds of a gallon of gas to travel 10 miles. How many miles can Spencer drive in his go-kart with 8 gallons of gas? So, yeah, it's pretty sweet. Like, I mean, first off, inventing a go-kart's amazing. Super speed, even better. But then one that actually is efficient using gas, hey, that's perfect, Spencer. Nice job. So here's what we know, guys. We know that he can go 10 miles with only two-thirds of a gallon of gas. And 8 gallons is like way more than two-thirds of a gallon. And so what we're trying to find out is like how many miles could he go if he had 8 whole gallons of gasoline? And so what I want to do real quick is I'm going to go ahead and kind of show you what I've drawn to get started. And I've decided to use a number line to go ahead and model the 8, or more or less demonstrate, directly model the 8 gallons of gas that he has. So each of these intervals from 0 to 1, that's a gallon. From 1 to 2, that's another gallon. From 2 to 3, that's another gallon. So each of those intervals represents 1 gallon of gas, and Spencer has a total of 8 gallons. So here's the deal. Like, we know that it takes two-thirds of a gallon of gas to travel 10 miles. And so, like, the logical thing to do with this is to go ahead and take this first gallon and split it into thirds, kind of like this. Okay? Because then what we can do with that is we could go ahead and we can show, like, hey, right from here to here, that's two-thirds of a gallon of gas, and then that would be, well, that's a little big, but that would be 10 miles. Like that would, and there we go. That would be 10 miles. He could go 10 miles with this two-thirds of a gallon. And we want to know, like, how many miles could he go with all 8 gallons, like 8 whole gallons? And so I feel like the logical thing to do, guys, at this step is to go ahead and to continue to, I'm going to go ahead and continue to go ahead and split all of these into thirds. Like, eventually, to answer this problem, we're going to have to split all 8 gallons into thirds. And so I'm going to do that real quick. Like, I'm going to take this next gallon and split it into thirds, and take this next one and split into thirds. And I'm going to split all 8 of these gallons into thirds. So be patient for me for a second. Technology is always a little bit slower when I'm teaching over here at home, but we'll be there in no time, friends. So there we go. We've now split all 8 gallons into thirds. And now what we're going to do is we're going to continue to make groups of two-thirds, because every group of two-thirds represents 10 miles that Spencer can drive on his amazing go-kart. So I'm going to go ahead like this, and that would be two-thirds. And now I'm going to go two-thirds again. And I'm just going to keep making as many groups of two-thirds as I can. And it's not the most beautiful thing, guys, but I think you understand what I'm doing here. Should maybe make these jumps a little bit bigger. Sorry. All right, here we go. So you can see what I'm doing. I'm just trying to make groups of two-thirds, because every group of two-thirds represents 10 miles of go-karting, which is pretty sweet. All right, let's go ahead. And looks like we got one more at the end here. So these groups are hideous, but that works. So here's what we know, guys. Like, we've gone ahead and we've split 8 gallons up in two-thirds, and now we have made as many groups of two-thirds as we can, because every group of two-thirds represents 10 miles. And so now, I mean, if we really want to, we could sit here, we could count by 10. Let's do it. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110, 120. And that's our answer, by the way. That is the answer to the question, is he would be able to go 120 miles if he had 8 whole gallons of gasoline with his super speed, high gas efficient go-kart. So that's our answer. But before you go ahead and just exit and say good enough, I want to talk about what kind of problem this actually was. And this is actually, maybe you didn't realize, but this problem is a division problem. And it's not a partitive or sharing division problem. Nothing's being shared here. But this was a grouping or a quotative problem. When we started this problem, really what we had to find out is how many groups of 2/3 are there in 8? We had to figure that out. Like the question we had to get to was how many groups of 2/3 are there in 8? And guys, that is the same thing as dividing 8, sorry, by 2/3. It is the same thing. Think about that. Let's go like a simpler connection. If the problem was 8 divided by 2, well, that would mean how many 2's are there in 8? So 8 divided by 2/3 means how many 2/3 are there in 8? So real quick, guys, like like we could count that. Like how many groups of 2/3 did we make? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There were 12 of them. So the question was how many groups of 8 are there in 2/3? Well, there was 12. But then we weren't done because now we know that all 12 of those groups of 2/3 represents 10 miles. So then we had to take that and we had to multiply it by 10, which gave us our 120 total miles. There's one last thing I want you to also see, and I'm going to go ahead and kind of erase this a little bit. Um, when I went and split all 8 of these gallons in 2/3, we actually ended up renaming 8 as an improper fraction. 8 wholes is the same thing as 24/3. So if we were to think about it like that, hey, 24/3 divided by 2/3 ultimately is asking you how many groups of 2/3 are there in 24/3, or how many groups of 2/3 make 24/3. And that would still be 12 because 2/3 times 12 gives you 24/3. So then we'd still have to multiply by 10 and we would still have 120 miles as our answer. So I hope you guys understood that problem. Guys, I'm going to tell you that the grouping slash quotative division problems are much harder to hear and recognize. Like the sharing problems are almost, it's really obvious when something is being shared equally. But division problems like this, like it didn't sound like anything was being split up, yet that's exactly what we had to do to solve this problem. We had to take 8 gallons and split them up into as many groups of 2/3 as we can, and that is a grouping or quotative division problem. All right, hope you guys have a great day, and good luck with the rest of your math for the day, friends.